conversation. And that, oh, thank you, Brittany. So that pressure is really real. And so just feeling that need to respond to the emails, to all of the messages, to all of the things all the time. And then again, also the fear of missing out. We talked about how social media amplifies that. So when you see things, your friends doing things, that can kind of lead to that FOMO or fear of missing out. Also, you know, before social media, if you didn't get invited to something, you didn't know you didn't get invited. Now it is something that is in your face and it's there. And so these are kind of all things that when we talk about tech being in the school, even though this isn't what it's meant for, it starts to bleed into a lot of this. It also, furthers the issues with the mental health and physical health and sedentary lifestyle, et cetera. So these are all things to take into consideration. I don't think our schools have entirely figured it out. I think that right now, a lot of what we're using it for is is a tool to get things done, to stay organized. And I think there's a lot of conversation around how do we use technology in a little bit more skill building way. Like, how can we use this technology to help increase critical thinking skills and analysis skills? And I know that that does happen to some extent, but that's a big part of the conversation that we were seeing doing research for this, is really shifting away from this just being a tool to being something that really facilitates a little bit more of that skill development. So that is kind of the wrap up from last week on tech usage in education systems. And so again, before we hop into today's topics, I just realized I didn't go over housekeeping. And then Brittany turned on the recording and I was like, oh, I will do that really quickly. So I'm sure she's put it in the chat by now. But after this is being recorded. You should receive an email about an hour after this session with the recording. So that will start on this slide because we forgot to hit recording. So I apologize for that. You also should be getting a link to a survey in the chat. It should populate in your browser. It also should be included in an email. You have to take that survey in order to have your CEU certificate generated for you. Something that we do see a lot of individuals do is when you are doing that survey, please make sure you have typed your email in correctly, or it will not send your CEU certificate to the correct email. We see that happen. It happens to me. I mistype things all the time. So just double check when you're putting your email in there that you're typing it correctly and that that's where you want that CEU to go. If you don't have it by the end of the day after taking the survey and you've checked your spam and junk folders, feel free to reach out to Brittany or myself and we'll get you set up with that. Other than that, I think those are my housekeeping things and we can hop into today's topics. So today we're also going to do a bit of a review and kind of tie them into the topics we're discussing today. So last week we talked about usage trends. I'm not going to go into depth here, but I wanted to make sure for anyone who wasn't able to attend the meeting last week or the training last week that this information was accessible to you because it makes today's information really relevant. So we know that 95% of our youth have access to a smartphone in which they can access the internet from. These two graphs that you see here in green and orange are actually studies done sans social media. So really the two takeaways here are one, that you can see that technology use increases for entertainment by age and for information, or sorry, increases the younger kids or younger adults and individuals are using technology for entertainment. Older adults and individuals are using technology for information purposes. And so that's just really interesting for us to know. And then the bottom bar graph is going to show you how many people feel reliant on technology. And I think up until age 65, we're seeing about 50% or more people say that they're reliant on technology. And even more, interestingly enough, about 44% of people are reporting doing nothing to mitigate the negative effects of that technology. So those are some of our key takeaways from last week that really ground us in what we're discussing. We also have a list of the mental health and physical health effects here. We're going to kind of go deeper into some of those today, so I'm not going to go too crazy into them, but it's important that they are listed. And then one of the other big topics we talked about last week was the effect on identity formation. And so I know my video is glitching. Is my audio okay? Am I good, Janny?
Your audio is just
okay. Cool. Just want to make sure. Okay, so yeah, so we really talked about identity formation and how we looked at Jay Marcia's theory on identity formation in these 4 phases. And we talked a lot about how when all you're being fed is things on the internet, or the majority of the media you're coming in contact with is kind of done through an algorithm that is designed to give us the best possible version of everything, it can really affect some of these identity creation phases. Not to mention, when we're in that diffusion phase or in that foreclosure phase, we're really trying a lot of things out. We're testing what feels good to us, what aligns with our values, etc. And things on the internet are permanent, even when you delete them. And so that is something that is really important to educate our youth on, and to educate them on, hey, this is something you're going through because all people go through this. And this is, how technology can either support you in doing that, or maybe have a negative impact on opportunities that you have in the future, on how you want to present yourself in the future, etc. So that was a big conversation from last week. And then lastly, we talked about screen time. Again, this is the exact slide from last week. I am not going to go into all of the details of this, but I wanted it to be in here for anyone who receives this slide deck and did not receive last week. So the big takeaway here is that in 2016, both the American Academy of Pediatrics and the World Health Organization changed their screen time limit recommendations. It used to be really strictly based in time frames, mostly looking at TV and movie watching. And they really made some adjustments due to just the way that we have progressed as a society, to looking at the quality of content when we start to get into those older ages, and looking at, is this facilitating connection? Is this facilitating, strong family time? Is this something that is helping them with a hobby or a special interest? And so we'll talk a little bit more about that today, but I wanted to make sure that this was included. So we're going to watch a quick video kind of about early childhood development, and this is in screen time. And this is really important because when we get into looking at those strategies for how you can kind of cultivate positive relationships, we're going to talk about how it really needs to start when kids are young. It doesn't have to. We can definitely intervene at older ages, but this is going to kind of give us some of that core information.
"98% of American homes with children now have an electronic mobile device. And on average, kids 8 and under spend more than 2 hours a day looking at a screen. Is that too much? Or could there actually be developmental benefits to screen time? This is Your Brain On, where we explore how the world affects our brains and ourselves. Young brains need a lot of external stimuli to develop, particularly from birth to age 3, what's known as the critical period. It's during this time that children's neurons are making connections for fundamental skills such as vision, hearing, and language. But these needs are based on centuries of human evolution, which used to have nothing to do with screens. Consider a child watching a video instead of listening to parents read a book. It's a far different experience for the brain. Rather than kids...
Oh no. Give me 1 second. Janny, I know that you've watched this video. Do you kind of want to explain where we end here? I can also do so, but I know that you've maybe watched it a couple more times than I have.
Yeah, we can just go to the next slide and then I'll
Yeah.
finish off this information. So basically, at
Awesome.
the end of the video, it essentially talks about how technology can be just as addictive as children kind of view anything that gives them dopamine. So things like as basically as addictive as sweets, or basically as addictive as anything that'll give you like an instantaneous reward. So anything that involves, I want something, I have it immediately, this is going to give you a certain amount of reward. But then if that thing is also catering to the mind of a child, which is exciting, loud, explosive, colorful, like these are all things that are going to be just like a dopamine dump for this child. And then if you imagine that level of intensity of dopamine from the ages of 3 all the way to adulthood, then there is going to be a lack of ability to be without, really. So anytime that there's boredom, it's going to feel like sandpaper because they've never really had an experience where there isn't this stimulation that's constantly available at their fingertips. So if a child cries and you give them an iPad, what you're telling them is, we're going to co-regulate with this thing that gives me a bunch of highs. So that's that's the
I'm
best
getting
I
that
could do in a
for you
nutshell.
notes.
Yeah.
That's great. I think the end of it, the only thing I'd add is that they did talk a little bit about how there is some research about how our world in general is increasing in like just being like the stimuli. And so there is some research saying that some screen usage can support early brains and being ready to kind of absorb that, but most of our information is focused on kind of the issues with dopamine and kind of what Janny was speaking to. So I appreciate you covering that, Janny,
Yeah.
since issues on this end.
Yeah, it's all good. There's a little bit of a tiny little gray box. Okay, there, it's gone now.
Okay,
So
awesome.
what is digital identity? So, this is like at the bare basics, it is personal identifiers, credentials and authentication, online activity and expression, your digital footprint, and then reputation and community presence. For this specific talk, we're going to be focusing on the highlighted portions, which are online activity and expression, and reputation and community presence. Some things just for you to understand what a digital identity is. If you are logging into something using your name, using your email, using your password, using your face ID, these are things that kind of develop a digital footprint of you and where you are and where you can be found on the internet, essentially. So there's many pieces that go into a digital identity of an individual, and an adult's digital identity is likely to be very robust and very diverse in many different aspects across all of these different bullet points because we've had more time on the internet. So a youth's digital identity, it's going to look a little bit different. They're going to have some things like social media, games, username on games, maybe emails on games, YouTube watch history, school affiliated pages, school email, and things of that nature. So children at school are in charge of their personal identity, and how they shape that identity is only going to follow them as long as they stay in that school or that school system that they're in. Unfortunately, online, their identity stays with them no matter where they move, no matter how much they grow. And if they go through those phases of diffusion and foreclosure, this could result in things permanently being placed online that ultimately may not reflect positively or align with who they grow to be. So, in some cases, that can be okay. But then in other cases, it can be detrimental to growth opportunities, relationship building, or just overall reputation. So, the creation of a digital identity for children is actually an emerging concept, but it's something that we have to continue to study and understand so that we can provide the best possible guidance and supports. And these can have positive impacts on their lives rather than, creating difficult situations when you become an adult. So, in this slide, anybody who is online is in the process of creating a digital identity, and especially those who are creating things directly linked to themselves. Somebody might ask themselves, how do we support a youth in creating a digital identity? It's important developmentally for a person to be able to have a say in how to shape their own identity and decide how they want to be perceived by others. That may not always have, they may not always have control over certain aspects of how others perceive them, but in a way it still benefits them to have agency in what they produce in that. So a person's identity may be their clothing, how they groom themselves, their demeanor, their behavior, and how they interact with each other in the world. Online, this can be profiles, posts, comments, likes, shares, search history, and what people post about them. So as you can see, these can be positive things. And then there's also a door for some negative things if people are posting things about you that are not true or that you don't want out there. And then digital identity doesn't just stop at school. As we've talked about in the past, it goes forward to adulthood. And you may experience this yourself with remembering any politician or celebrity that has been canceled for views that they had that they posted about when they were in middle school or high school or college. So these things that are posted, they may be things that they deleted, but somebody else has screenshot and then they have a record of it. Or there's things called Wayback Machine that can pull up a timeline of what that page used to look like, and they can screenshot from there as well. So if somebody's used a slur on Twitter, for example, in 2005, somebody could take a screenshot of that, and later in their career, this is something that's coming back to haunt them. So digital hygiene is really important to instill in a young person because youth historically have never really had to deal with an image that followed them for the rest of their lives. Like they're allowed to grow and become different and learn. And then the other aspect of digital identity that we may get into later is they're also exposed to things like missing out on stuff and then witnessing it in real time. So historically, kids never really had to deal with knowing if all of their classmates went to a movie together and they were left out. But now that we have Snapchat, Snap Maps, Instagram Maps, you can see a collection of these people's emojis hanging out together at the movie theater, and then you're the only one that's not there. You're seeing this and feeling this in real time over summer break, when normally a child would be cushioned from witnessing something like this because they're not seeing it happen in front of them. So, parents, caregivers, and adults who have influence over teens' lives can support this identity creation by they themselves role modeling healthy digital behavior. If you are ensuring that you have privacy talks and talking about what should and should not be shared and who they should be shared with, what you should be posting, how you can engage with others online, how they can comment on others' things positively, and then educate and discuss digital usage, such as things that increase digital literacy, like how is your data collected? How permanent is an online post? How can things be perceived and how you write them, and how things can change over time? So, encouraging positive self expression and then only commenting on things in a positive way is going to have what we will later call as like an upstanding digital citizen, and then addressing and educating on risks and potential safety issues. Like if you take a photo with your location on and then you send that photo to somebody else, and that person sends your photo to somebody else, that person can pull the metadata off that photo and get the precise location of where you took that photo down to the coordinates of where your bedroom was. So, staying engaged and connected and supported throughout this process and educating the individual that you're working with can always kind of like have better outcomes than having them hide these things and then we don't have the conversation at all.
Absolutely. And so the goal is really to boost the digital confidence of the user and make sure that they are feeling as though they can access and use technology responsibly and that they understand safety. And so we're really wanting to empower youth to navigate the digital world responsibly, to make informed decisions about what they're engaging in, what they're searching, what they are resharing, posting, all of those things Janny just touched on. And so a lot of that comes from the adults in those children's lives being involved. And I think that this is such, and we're going to talk about it ad nauseum at the end of this training. But I think that it's such a hard topic for adults to get in on. One, we just don't feel as informed. It's hard for us as adults to talk about something that we don't feel like we fully understand. Whether that is like doesn't matter the topic, it's uncomfortable to discuss something we don't know. And so really that is part of why I feel like a lot of adults don't want to have this conversation with teenagers, because teenagers know more. They can tell you things you didn't understand. They can kind of manipulate information, things like that. And so but we have to have those conversations, and we have to make sure that we have the education and the knowledge to feel confident in having that conversation with the youth that we work with, or the children and families that we work with, or when we're working with caregivers and trying to help support them and having these conversations. And so we're going to be looking at like, how do you ask for help? How do I ask for help because something bad is happening online? How do I ask for help because I'm not doing well? Because like I'm struggling. We want to teach you to be aware of like the age appropriate safety risks, and Janie's going to get into those here in a little bit. That definitely is something that we don't need to scare them with, but also let's be realistic. Let's look at what platforms are you using? What do you need to know if you're going to engage in that platform, etc. And then how do we hold people accountable? And what risks do we as caregivers potentially or adults working with youth need to be aware of? And then what are the agreed upon boundaries? You'll again hear this later, but there isn't many behaviors that we asked of children, regardless of age, that we as adults don't role model. And that is really going to be the key to a lot of this, is us reevaluating our relationship with technology, is the caregivers of youth reevaluating their relationship with technology and trying to kind of go on this journey with their youth to figure out what works for us as a family or as a household unit, etc. Um, And then again, like I said, sharing those risks in a way that's empowering for our youth so they feel as though they can identify them, avoid them, discuss them, and not necessarily fear them. That kind of goes back to that extinction mindset of it's not an option for individuals to not engage with technology in some capacity. For most of us living in, traditional society, you can choose other lifestyles that would eliminate the need for technology, but that's not a common path that most of us are taking. And so um, we have to know how to do this in a way that is safe, the same way you got to learn to drive. It's scary to let, I sometimes, as a 32-year-old, think back to how my parents would have. Like, I can't believe I drove at 16. I can't imagine letting a 16-year-old child behind the wheel of a car. When I was 16, I thought I was perfect. I was like, oh my God, I'm so old. I got this. And so it's the same kind of thing. We have to kind of go through that phase with them to let them grow and understand a skill that is necessary for their life. And this is just the same. Just a little bit different path to get there.
All right. So we did discuss these in depth last week, but it'll be helpful to ensure that caregivers are aware and able to help children understand these risks as well, because we want to focus on confidence, responsibility, and safety online. So, physical health, there's an increased risk of obesity and sleep problems, as well as vision issues. Mental health, there's higher rates of depression and anxiety. As far as social skills, these over excessive use of technology is going to cause struggles with social connections, emotion regulation, and self expression in face to face interactions. And then addictions like technology addictions, or just like any other reward systems, an over release of dopamine, the feel good chemical, is going to make screen time extremely addictive, which can lead to compulsive use, especially with activities like gaming and social media. So, in child development, without regular face to face interaction, this causes children to miss opportunities to build essential skills such as communication, problem solving, emotion regulation, and self control. So, when used mindfully, technology can foster creativity, learning, and connection. Encouraging a balanced approach to screen time can help children develop these benefits while minimizing risks. So, I'm gonna be on this slide for a little bit, just so you know. So in last week's webinar, we did discuss how algorithms are built to show you only the best of the best videos. But I also want to remind you that algorithms are also built to show you only what you want to see. So the longer you look at videos, the likes that you choose to give, what you click on for how long determines what you see. So if a child is depressed, for example, they're going to get more videos about depression, about other people talking about depression, how depression feels, day in the life of a depressed person, and so on. So you get the idea. This is how we develop this spiral into extremist places like support groups and extremist videos and violent videos. And so I'm just going to talk about each platform in case we don't know about all of these different platforms. Instagram and TikTok are image and video sharing platforms. And so their algorithm driven feeds are going to give you constant exposure to idealized images, beauty standards, comparison, and will increase body dissatisfaction and anxiety. And filter and editing tools also reinforce these unrealistic appearance norms. And then engagement metrics like likes and followers will tie self worth to popularity. So endless scrolling is going to foster compulsive use and then also potentially even poor sleep hygiene if they're using this right before bed. Things like Snapchat, Instagram, and Facebook have disappearing messages. I put that in quotes because it doesn't actually disappear. It just disappears on the front end, but it's being stored on the back end. And then Snapchat also has things like streaks, which pressure people to maintain daily interactions, leading to stress and compulsive checking. So, if you've ever heard children talk about, oh my God, I'm going to break my streak, I have to send a snap, like that's what this is. And then location sharing on Instagram, Facebook, and SnapMap, especially SnapMap, there's safety risks and stalking and fear of missing out issues that come up when you see friends hanging out together in a little group. You can literally see it visually on a map that these people are hanging out without you. And so there's like a false sense of privacy as well with these disappearing messages, because parents can't see what you sent earlier. But if you're sending risky stuff like sexting, and then you're not talking to your parents about it, and it's not actually disappearing, then there's a huge potential for this to be used in nefarious ways by other people who are not nice people. YouTube can have recommendation algorithms which push extremist content or push kind of like that rabbit hole content. Like, have you ever clicked on a YouTube video and then you go back to your homepage and there's 6 recommendations for the similar topics? Like, this is exactly how people go down like pro anorexia rabbit holes or conspiracy theory rabbit holes, and then it becomes their reality. And then comment sections as well, they get exposed to what it looks like when people are cyberbullying each other and providing toxic feedback. So suddenly it's okay to talk to these people when you don't see them in person and say this to their face and actually see their reaction. And then there's other things like autoplay features, which encourages binge watching, so it automatically plays the next video on a loop. Then we have X, which used to be called Twitter. They do not believe in censorship. And so everything is just out there. I know that we might have witnessed something terrible like a few weeks ago when somebody posts something that probably should not be posted on a public forum. So the public permanence of these posts is also a mistake that children make, and that can resurface in a future thing in the adulthood, what they call digital tattoo. So there's also other things on Twitter like doxing and cyberbullying and harassment. So they can collect data about you based on your posts, find where you live, post it online. Because again, Twitter is not very censored. And so these are places that people go to post things that would normally be censored in other platforms.
Can you explain doxing?
Oh, sorry.
No, you're
Doxing
good.
is when somebody finds your information, like your address, phone number, parents, family members, and posts it online and encourages people to stalk or harass or physically assault you in public or at your house or something like that. Doxing is technically illegal, but if your information's already out there and it's posted to an extremist group, then obviously there's going to be some safety issues. Discord, I'm going to talk about this a little bit in depth just so people understand what this is, because a lot of people don't use Discord. But Discord is a platform that has open chat rooms. Anybody can create what's called a server, which is like a standing meeting room. And then there's channels in these standing meeting rooms, and you can create locks or certain levels of these people are allowed to go to these meeting rooms, and these people allowed to go to these meeting rooms and these other meeting rooms. And so there's like a kind of like a tiered system inside of Discord where the person who's in charge of that server can moderate who is allowed where in the server. And then they have moderators who can change these permissions as well. And so Discord sometimes can be a place where people can utilize these open rooms as a place for grooming, predation, and unmonitored adult contact with children. There's peer pressure in these places and toxic gaming culture, potentially exposing you to harassment, sexism, and racism. And then there's also a pressure to stay connected. That being said, there are good things to Discord. They're just places that people can meet. But if you think about a 13-year-old going on to something that's like an open room that other people can join, you can kind of understand how that could be a safety risk if you have no boundaries and if you don't understand how to protect yourself. I'm going to talk about Facebook a little bit, just because kids don't typically use Facebook anymore, but it's still a thing. So we'll talk about it. Facebook requires you to put your real name, which can put teens at risk if their privacy is not managed well. They also have targeted ads, which may exploit insecurities, such as giving you weight loss ads or advertisements about things that you're worried about. Like if you have eye bags, you're going to get eye serum advertisements. So groups and forums on there can also spread misinformation, and potentially there's sometimes support groups. I put that in quotations because sometimes it's like pro self-harm support groups or something like that. And kids just can't tell sometimes when something is unsafe versus feeling like community, but maybe might be a little toxic. Now I'm going to come back to the things that are on the screen. Fun fact, Roblox in 2023, over 13,000 incidences of child exploitation were reported to the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children, with 24 predators arrested for grooming and abusing victims on this platform. This is a gaming platform that is targeted towards children. A lot of predators will use child-focused platforms to connect with and groom children. If it is a kid's game like Fortnite, Roblox, whatever, any of these places an adult could pose as a child and befriend them and groom them into feeling safe, and then take them off of Roblox and put them on to Discord. And then in Discord, we have these open chats. And then you might take a kid from Discord to Snapchat. Now we have disappearing messages and photos going back and forth. So you can see the pipeline of like, first I meet kid on Roblox, then I take them to Discord, then I take them to Snapchat, how that could be an issue, especially if these are things that are being hidden from parents. And then another fun thing is Snapchat and Instagram. I always it has disappearing messages, so your parents can't see what you're writing on Snapchat because it's going to disappear in an hour or it's going to disappear immediately. But that doesn't mean that the other person could not have another phone or device or iPad and takes a photo of their phone when they open your Snapchat. So you're not going to see that, because like on Snapchat, it has this false sense of security because it's like, oh, like if they screenshot it, I can see they screenshotted it. Or if they screen recorded it, I can see they screen recorded it. Well, what happens if they have an iPad and they're recording it from another device? Well, now
Well,
they
what do
have it
you
too.
do if, I mean, I can know that that happened. What do I do about it? I think is another thing. Like maybe that
Yeah,
prevents me from sending anything additional because they did that and I received the notification that it was screen recorded or snap or screenshotted, but whatever I just sent, it's too late for.
exactly. And so I'll just like run you through one last thing, mobile gaming and online gaming. So gaming features like RNG, this is random number generation. This is kind of like children's slot machines. So it's like when you are on Fortnite and you're going to buy a loot box, the loot box is maybe going to give you a possibility for like this really rare skin for your character, but then there's like a higher possibility for all these other skins that maybe you don't want. And so if you spend $5 and you have a random number generated way of potentially maybe getting this rare skin and highly likely not getting it, and you keep paying $5 over and over, and sometimes you get something you want, sometimes you don't get something you want. This is why I kind of say it's like children's slot machines, because it's like sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't, and it costs you money either way. And then you take this, and then you have an adult online that you're friends with who's buying you loot boxes. What power dynamic does this create? Just think about that. Like, if you have a child who has an adult friend who has money, paying for their loot boxes, building a relationship with them, taking them to Discord, taking them to Snapchat, this kind of is gonna take you down that sexploitation path, which segues me to the next one.
Yeah, I think we have a question before we
Yeah.
pop on.
Yeah,
We're going to turn
you
the
were
video
talking
on.
about I think predators and predation. Someone asked how many predators were arrested. I don't know if you have
24, it said.
24. All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
And that is the predators that were arrested specifically at that time. That does not count the other predators who probably have been arrested that was not 2023.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's also just only Roblox. So there's definitely other games, other platforms, and other places that adults can exploit children.
Yeah, and someone said that they were able to, as a teenager, have lots of fake Facebook accounts, and then they also mentioned that Fortnite has something called Delulu now. I don't know if you were planning to talk about that, Janny. Basically a proximity chat game, and there's hundreds of kids on there as young as 6 interacting with
Yeah. So
randoms.
I don't know specifically about Delulu, but there are many, 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 many places where children can essentially do voice chat on in-game places. So I'm going to give you an example. If you are on Fortnite, I don't play Fortnite, so I don't know much about this, but I'm just going to give you an example because I play other games. But if you're on Fortnite and you have something called proximity chat, where the closer somebody is to you, the louder their voice is. So it feels like they're in the room with you, even though you're playing a game. Um, that is how you might meet somebody online in a video game and develop a relationship with them. And then that is where an adult could then say, "Oh my God, we've been playing 20 games in a row together. We've been laughing together. This is a great time. Why don't we hang out on my Discord server and you can meet my friends and we'll all have fun?" So any game. It's not Fortnite. That's not the problem. It's not Roblox. That's not the problem. It's specifically any game that has any feature where you can have communication, whether through text or verbal. These are spaces where adults could specifically go find kids and pull them off that platform to a more open environment like Discord, where you can do audio calls, video calls, just like how you have FaceTime on your iPhone. So I'm going to segue into this topic because I'm going to talk about this a long time too. So somebody in the last webinar wanted us to talk about sexploitation, and I just wanted to check and see if they are here and if they want to clarify what question they had before I kind of go into my talk about this topic.
Yeah, if you brought that up last time, feel free to pop in the chat and let us know kind of specifically what you were looking for. We're going to talk about it regardless, but we want to make sure we hit your question spot on if we can.
Yeah. So while we wait for that, I'll hop in here and start talking about child behavior red flags. So, how do I know if my kid's potentially being groomed or trafficked online? Well, this is hard to tell because typically they're trying to hide it because they know something is a little weird, but they probably don't know what it is. They don't have the vocabulary for it. Maybe it's hard to explain in words, or maybe they feel like, I don't know, giving the benefit of the doubt. So you're going to see excessive online time. So they're going to have a sudden increase in excessive use. They're going to have secrecy. They may hide their online activities, refuse to let you see their screen, switch tabs quickly when you're nearby, quickly exit out of something. They may become possessive, start, not allowing you to see their phone, maybe trying to hide certain messages or getting mad when you take away the phone, extra mad. They may start using language that is outside of their normal vocabulary all of a sudden, like suddenly using sexually explicit language or suddenly using mature language that's outside of their norm. They may also have emotion changes like becoming withdrawn, emotionally volatile, or display sudden mood swings. Inappropriate content also could be found on their phone, such as finding sexually explicit photos or pornography, or maybe they're looking at pornography on the devices that they use. And then the red flags on the right side is the behaviors of a predator toward the child that they might not tell you about. So they may be not requiring, sorry, inquiring about their age, their date of birth, who they live with, where they live, maybe requesting like closer and closer proximity. Because, like, maybe the child's like, "Oh, yeah, I live in Kansas." But then it takes like weeks of knowing them and feeling that trust before they start saying, "Oh, I live in Olathe, Kansas." And then, "Oh, I go to this school. Oh, I go to this school at this time." Or, "Me and my friend went to this coffee shop." And maybe the coffee shop's only a few miles away from their house. So it kind of just starts getting more and more precise over time. And then you know, they're questioning the kid about like, "Oh, what do your parents do for work? Where do they work?" Maybe bringing up, "Oh, are there problems at home?" Maybe they start bringing up, "Hey, like, are we best friends?" And then it kind of escalates, right? So then we start having inappropriate requests like, "Can you send me a selfie of this? Can you send me a selfie of that?" Suddenly it's, "Oh, like, let me see that new pair of shorts you bought. Oh, let me see the new bikini you just bought." And then it kind of just like escalates and escalates. And so then it starts doing, then it starts being really weird. Like, "Oh my God, your legs look so great in that." Or, "Oh my God, like that was so cute. Why don't I buy you something?" And so it kind of just, it just creeps its way in and it starts getting a little bit weirder and weirder. And that's why it's so hard for children to really conceptualize that they are being groomed. Because, like, you may ask your child about something and they may be really defensive because they're like, oh, I know that you're going to think it's weird, but like, I promise you, like, I've known this person for like 6 months and they would never do that to me. So it kind of like they build this relationship. It's not like they just suddenly go from, I met you on Fortnite, give me your nudes. It's like, I met you on Fortnite and then I started having a relationship with you and we were hanging out on Discord for all day, every day for a few weeks. And then, it just escalates over time. And so traffickers really try to get their claws in there. They look for personal information, they ask a lot of questions, they don't say much about themselves, they make you feel special. They start making uncomfortable comments, minimizing, brushing it off when there's a little bit of a pushback. They start pressuring you to meet in person. They want to see you in a vulnerable state so they can exploit that vulnerable state. And then they may ask some questions or comments like, oh, what's wrong? You can talk to me. Tell me what's bothering you. I understand you better than anybody else. Like, I know, like, last week you said your parents are fighting. Do you think they're really going to listen to you right now? They have their own problems. I can be here for you. So, like, any small tidbit of personal information that a child will offer can easily be exploited by somebody like this. And so, kind of like just to touch on the sexploitation aspect, how do we go from Fortnite to sexploitation? So, step one, I meet you on Fortnite. We become friends. We're normal. Maybe I'm saying I'm a few years older than you. Maybe you're 13 and I'm 16. Then we go to, oh my God, me and my friends, we always hang out on Discord. Do you want to join? Okay. Now we go on Discord. I'm hanging out with you every day, maybe like 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. before dinner time for the next 3 months. In those 3 months, they learn about parents, friends, school, family, relationships. Who am I dating? What do you do when you come home? When do your parents come home from work? Okay. So now we're like getting to the phase of that connectivity where you're like, "Oh my god, like thank you so much. You've bought me loot boxes like 3 times, like I owe you one." Now we're like, "Okay, let's go to Snapchat. Oh my god, like you should reveal your Snap map to me so I know when you come home so that we can play games together. Now I know where you are." Okay. And now we're starting to exchange things back and forth. We're exchanging pictures. You're commenting, making me feel special. And then maybe there's one day where they're like, hey, like, I'm just like so lonely. Like, give me a picture of you in a bikini. Like, I know, like, blah, 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 make it fun, make it funny. And then maybe the child's uncomfortable, but they're like, well, this person is so nice to me. They're always there for me. And they always buy me loot boxes, and I do owe them one. So, like, I guess I'll do it this time and I won't do it next time. They get the picture. Now they have a picture. Now the next time is, oh, you sent me one earlier. Like, is it like, were you uncomfortable? Is that why you don't want to send me another one? You don't want to have this conversation. So now you send another one and another one and another
Yeah.
one. It kind of escalates from there. And now I have blackmail. If you don't do this, I'm going to tell your parents. If you don't do this, I'm going to tell your parents that you've been talking to somebody and you've been sending inappropriate pictures. Or I know who your friends are. I'm going to send your pictures to them. So
Yeah.
now we have sexploitation.
Yeah, I love that that's kind of that you explained that trajectory because we have a comment and question in the chat that's an individual explaining that they've had several or seen several instances where teens have been asked to send explicit images and then have been blackmailed, potentially in some cases leading to suicidal attempts. And the question is, what should patients and clinicians, or sorry, not patients, parents and clinicians ask to identify these concerns? And I know that we've given a lot of red flags, but are there any, I mean, I know I can think of some, but I kind of want to hear what you have to say first. Like, what are the questions? I mean, we're going to talk a lot about conversations and questions later, but specific to this topic, what questions should we be asking to hopefully identify these things before they happen?
So I think what's hard is like, this is actually a segue into the next topic, the next slide.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
I think what's hard about this is like there's not really a one question. It's having that relationship with your child, having that relationship with your patient,
Mhm.
and encouraging that relationship or being that safe adult. You know, a person who finds safe adults that are not safe are going to latch on to those people. So if they already have safe adults in their life, they're less likely to latch on to a safe adult outside of their life. They're actually going to be able to see like and model like my relationship with my guidance counselor at school is a safe relationship. This relationship with this adult online makes me feel unsafe. Why is it different? So they're going to have something to model after. So if you're modeling like appropriate boundaries, appropriate touch, appropriate conversations, when they bring up inappropriate things to you, you're not judging them and you're having a conversation with them that is boundaried, educational, and purposeful. They will then know, oh, it's not normal for an adult to talk to me in that way. That's
Yes.
weird. So like
Yes.
I think for us as adults, our role is actually to model the behavior that is positive so that when they ultimately get into that position, they can start questioning things. But if
Yes.
you are seeing behaviors like sudden upticks in online use, secrecy, possessiveness, mature language, all those things, you can start by creating segue to the next one.
Got
You can start by
it.
creating a judgment-free space and saying, "Hey, I really notice that you're being like I don't know, it's like you're pulling away from me and I don't know what's happening. Like, is something, is there a new boyfriend? Are you interested in somebody online? Like, what's happening?" So you kind of build that non-scary space for them to say potentially who they're talking to, potentially who is making them withdraw from you or making them act weird. And you can call those things out in a very gentle, non-scary way of like, Hmm. Like, yeah, like tell me more about that friend. Oh, what do
Mhm.
they talk to you about? Oh, when do you guys hang out? And kind of like sprinkle in those questions so then you can assess for yourself like, oh, are they showing the signs? Are they inquiring about location, inquiring about their age, inquiring about their friends and their parents? Have you told them about where your parents work? And you can start really assessing like, oh, this person is really asking for weird personal information and they don't know this kid, and why are they trying to get to know that kid? Because like you are a guidance counselor, you are a therapist, you're an adult that is in this kid's life. It's kind of normal for you to know about their parents, but some stranger online that they met on Fortnite, it's absolutely not normal for that adult to want to know those things about that kid. Like if you are an adult and you are on Fortnite and you meet a 13-year-old, the questions that you don't ask are those things. So
Yes.
if you yourself are like, well, that's weird. Why would that adult do that? But I wouldn't do that. That's a sign for you to start questioning the kid about this person in a really non judgmental way because this kid is going to hedgehog, like, go inward because they're going to be like, oh my God, these people are not going to trust this person as much as I do. I have to protect them. They're gonna
Yeah.
take my phone away. I'm not gonna be able to talk to them anymore. So
Yeah, your
that kind
reaction
of
matters. I think that that's a
yeah,
huge piece of it. Is like build a world where they can come to you and then really be mindful as the adult how you react and engage, even if they tell you something really scary. Like,
yeah,
even if they say, "Hey, someone tried to get me to send explicit photo to them," how we react to that will dictate what is shared with us in the future as safe adults for these individuals. And so I think working with parents and really working on like you panic behind closed doors about that. And in front of your child, you are curious, you are supportive, you are trying to understand how they are navigating that situation and what support you need to provide. But the second it's like your phone's gone, well, why am I being punished for not doing something? Right? Like, why are you taking
yeah,
my phone away when I came to you because I felt unsafe? So, just really making sure that judgment free space is not just so people will come talk to you, but also how you respond.
yeah. And then understanding the why behind the behavior. There's obviously something that this kid is getting from this person. And so often I know that this slide is specifically about like how to navigate like a kid who has maybe a lot of access or like they're trying to access explicit materials, but this can also be used for the same thing that we just talked about, like sexploitation and then like trying to assess if a person is unsafe with them online. So you want to understand the why behind any behavior and trying to approach it with curiosity rather than judgment. And so you might be asking them gentle, open ended questions like, what are you feeling when you watch these things? Or what are you feeling when you're taking these photos? Or what are you feeling when you're talking to this person online? Like, what makes you want to be friends with them? What makes you want to talk to them every day after school? And then also like trying to encourage them to engage in things offline. So if you're seeing that they're having this like compulsion to check their phone all the time, or their compulsion to be accessing certain things like Discord, talking to certain people, being on games, making sure that they have like a healthy association for offline connection, like sports and hobbies and clubs, and joining certain things that they have historically been excited to do. So like if this particular person really loves, I don't know, really loves Hello Kitty. I don't know what to say. Maybe they really love Hello Kitty. Maybe we find them a group at the public library that always meets together and watches Hello Kitty or plays a Hello Kitty game or whatever. Like finding external connections that mirror things like Discord, or mirror things like what this connection community feeling that they're getting out of Discord or Fortnite or whatever. Like just making sure that these are opportunities and not forced. So like giving them these opportunities from a young age so that they can have the agency to decide, I want to do this versus this, or maybe tomorrow I will play Fortnite and today I will go to this club, or today I will do sports and tomorrow I will play Fortnite. Whatever it is, like they have that agency and that opportunity. It gives them the ability to have the intrinsic motivation to choose
Mhm.
these offline activities. And then
Yeah.
I know that the scariest thing that you can probably imagine having to deal with is a kid that you have now witnessed they are taking explicit photos of themselves on their phone, or they have explicit photos of other people on their phone. So making sure that when you're having these conversations about sexuality and inappropriate pictures, that you're doing that with a lot of care, because there's so much shame surrounding this topic, and this shame is exactly what people exploit. So like trying to be secretive about these photos, they don't want you to know that it's happening naturally, right? Who wants their parents to know they take inappropriate photos on their phone? Who wants their parents to see these inappropriate photos? Like it's just like not something that you want to happen. And so they're going to turn to these things and be secretive, and these are just great places for groomers to exploit them from having boundaries. So I guess like an example of this is like if you see that your child is posting or sending or have possession of explicit photos and videos of themselves, it's really important to kind of follow this, creating a judgment free space, understanding the behavior, talking to them about it, being curious. And then when they are ready, when you can feel that they're ready, you can ask them like, "Hey, like can I tell you something that I'm just like a little bit concerned about, and maybe like you can just help me decide like what you want to do?" And then they might say, "Okay," reluctantly. And then you'll say, okay, well, unfortunately, like what I'm worried about is like technically you're holding on to child pornography. In the eyes of the law, technically, if like a police officer had your phone, or a police officer got your friend's phone that you sent this to, like they're gonna say that what happened is distribution of child pornography. Like these are federal crimes. So like I'm just worried because like if you have them and if you've sent them, like I really want to know because I want to make sure to keep you safe. And I'm really worried that if we don't kind of like talk about this and talk more about like these facts so that you can make an appropriate decision for yourself, then I want to make sure that you're making safe decisions, but ultimately you're the one that's making the decisions even when I'm not there. So I just want you to have everything so you can make an educated decision. And then we start talking about like, what's factually true. Factually, this is child pornography. You're under 18. Factually, Sending it somewhere is distribution. These are things that could hold jail time. And I know that if there's somebody that's forcing you to do these things, the police are more likely to look into that strongly than the fact that you did it. But we want to stop this as soon as possible because I don't want you to get in trouble. And I also just don't want people to hold those things against you because, like, they may say that they're going to keep it safe, but how do you know? Like,
Yeah.
sending it in itself is exposing it to the world potentially.
Yeah.
Like, this could go to somebody else's phone and it could be intercepted in between, or it could go to their phone and they can share it somewhere else. And so we're talking about it in like a very like educated kind of way and just making sure they feel heard and valued, making sure they feel cared about, that you're not punishing them, that it's like you're a safe person to bring this up to. So then this may lead down to the road of like, okay, like what made you start what made you start creating this? Like, is it kind of like it makes you feel good, or is it like somebody asked for it? Did you feel comfortable when they asked? Like, and you start kind of assessing, like, is there somebody involved? Like, is there an adult involved? Is this something that maybe like you need to get to the bottom of, like, who they sent it to? Was it somebody at school or was it somebody online? And so on and so on. And then so for you as an adult, if you know that there's potentially no involvement besides just having these photos, trying to encourage deleting and not reproducing, and then talking about safety and internet safety and just like, digital identity. We talked about that earlier, of like how this can follow you into the future. But then if you can get the sense there's somebody else involved, they can delete the photos, but don't delete the messages, because if you do find that there is an adult that is exploiting them, you want to keep the evidence in order to turn into law enforcement. But we have these conversations delicately and just making sure you have somebody that is understanding of the legal system or somebody that's understanding of the laws to kind of guide you in like what you need to collect versus what you need to delete, just because you don't want to accidentally delete evidence that you might need to file a police report. And so if this material's already been shared and you delete like the copy of the selfie that they took, it's still out there. So like you don't have to keep that selfie, but I wouldn't delete the messages or the screenshots of the
Yeah.
messages, and making sure you
And
screenshot the messages.
Janny, I know that you're kind of taking a big
Huge
role right
tangent.
now as like the parent.
Sorry.
No,
Yeah.
you're fine. But I do think it's important. Like there is a lot of like there's some mandated reporting things. Like we're talking a lot about like what we would like hope a
As a
parent would have the
professional.
conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, as a
Yeah.
professional, there are other things that we have to abide by with reporting if we're
Yeah.
aware of these materials and things. And I just want to make the comment that that also requires a conversation. Like we're not
Hmm.
encouraging people to make reports without discussing that with
Yeah.
the child and the family as well, because you again, hey, to your point, the facts are this is where we sit. This is what we need to do. And so I think that that's just something else I wanted to touch on. I know that there's a couple people in the chat who are
Hmm.
like, you have to report it. And I was like, yes, you absolutely do if you
Yeah.
are in a mandated reporter position. And we also had someone just touch on the fact that you can also, and I think this is a good point, like you can I can voluntarily share explicit photos and still become a victim when it is then shared beyond what I permissed it to be.
Yeah.
As a child, it is still distribution of child pornography, but I think that that's also just something that's important to touch on if
Yeah.
you're having that conversation. Brittany?
Yeah. So someone was just asking, and I know we were talking a little bit about mandated reporting here, but just some clinician for suggestions for clinicians who see some of these red flags in usage with their
Yeah,
clients, but maybe parents aren't doing anything about it or still allow their child like unsupervised screen time. So I didn't know if you all
yeah,
had anything like that. I know, like you said, the conversation's really important to have, but like what do we do as therapists when it doesn't seem to be clicking for the grown up?
the parent.
Yeah.
I mean, I was
As
just gonna say, I would say that until you have something concrete with which you can report or kind of make a formal movement on like, you want to be that safe adult, you want to ask, you want to be the judgment free zone, understanding the behavior, kind of what we wouldn't. And I think that it's, whether or not a parent is receptive to that or changing the
Yeah.
boundaries at home, we can still try to provide that support and continue to attempt to communicate with parents about their role in that.
And I would also just ensure that like, this is, like, what a typical ethical dilemma is. Like,
Yes.
not all of a child doing something like taking an inappropriate selfie is going to be under the mandated reporting
Yes.
umbrella. Specifically, any mandated reporting is going to involve an adult exploiting a child or the parents neglecting when a child is being exploited or coerced or manipulated, whatever, right? But when we're talking about peer to peer or self to friend, whatever it is, it's not involving coercion, manipulation, exploitation, assault, whatever, like those things we have to really just manage our own biases and recognize when we need to have an creating a judgment-free space, conversation, education, talking about what the child has agency over and what they don't have agency over, and like talking about safety in that aspect and having them be empowered to make the right decision, especially if the parents are not involving themselves in something, or maybe the parents don't feel like they have control over their child because we're going to get to it at the end, but fun fact, just because you take away this phone doesn't mean that they can't find another phone. So, like, what we need is the intrinsic motivation to be healthy and to have boundaries and to have the responsibility. And that's
And
kind
the
of what
interpersonal
this,
safety skills to identify all of those
yeah.
situations. Yeah.
So as a therapist, like your role really is to help that person develop those skills. And so it's a teaching opportunity, it's a learning opportunity. It's trying not to be in a situation where, like, if there is no exploitation, neglect, or abuse happening, then there's not necessarily like a report that needs to be made as much as there needs to be an education on what's going to happen if this comes out, what's going to happen if somebody has this and holds it over your head or sends it to somebody that you don't want them to send it to, what's going to happen if the police get involved and these are illegal materials that you're distributing. So like we're really just talking about like having them have the agency, understanding, and responsibility, because you can't control the 99% of their day. And honestly, like the parents can't even control 50% of their day. Like their kids are going to school and they're going to have access potentially to other people's devices, or even like have their own burner phone in their locker. So, like, at the end of the day, the important piece is having the child knowing what they should be doing and actively making the choice to do that.
Absolutely. And I just saw a question pop in that I just want to not answer because I don't know the answer, but kind of give my advice on how to get the answer. But what age can a person make the choice legally to send or receive whatever they want? Is it the same in Kansas and Missouri? I am not a legal professional, and I would definitely suggest consulting a legal professional or doing some research on the legality, but I would imagine that that like technically in legal terms, that would be the same as the age of consent. However, to we know that that does not always apply to all situations between children. So I think that that kind of also just, would you report to teenagers under like the age of consent for doing other maybe like physical sexual activity again, and you're really going to have to do the ethical dilemma work of like what is involved in this, what has gone into this, what is the issue here. And so again, I don't know the ages for Kansas and
Yeah.
Missouri. I know that one of them is 17, I'm pretty sure, but I don't know which one for sure. And I would definitely encourage you guys to consult with, if you're with an agency, their legal department or any other legal representatives you have to figure that out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So for this one, um, it all kind of culminates down to this. So, part of building up a team's responsibility in tech usage is ensuring that they have the agency to make decisions. So, we're going to teach them to not participate in harmful behavior like sharing or liking mean comments or posts or rumors, and not sharing things that hurt other people. And the upstanding citizen also actively supports the victim, whether publicly or privately, and uses their own voice and platform to shut down hate instead of fueling it. And so these people are also going to report harmful behavior to the platforms or trusted adults. And then they encourage kindness and respect even in difficult situations. So instead of adding to cruelty, an upstander chooses empathy over apathy and action over silence. So just going back to like the things that we've just talked about in the past few slides, if you think about it, like when you're creating a digital upstanding citizen, a growing digital upstanding citizen from a very young age, we're teaching them how to be kind, just like how we would teach them in school anti-bullying stuff. This is now going to be developed into digitally, because things that you are also doing that hurt other people are going to be things that you're going to be remembered for in your digital identity. And so there's kind of like a personal accountability and personal responsibility aspect to it as well. And as a person who is a provider who's working with a child, maybe like starting to have these digital conversations from when they're younger, so that when they start developing and being able to have accounts and have the ability to like and comment and share and all those types of things, like that they are making these decisions to be kind and making these decisions to shut down hate or block hate, or not allow it to happen, and ensuring that when they are showing up online, that this is like the person that they would show up as in person as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, it's about fostering that confidence. So we've kind of talked about all of those safety risks, how to have those conversations and navigate, and the importance of allowing technology use in a way to build confidence to become an upstander. And so these are kind of 5 different areas that help build confidence. There's a lot of research out there on what builds confidence, but these are 5 areas that I felt like really kind of um, applied to the technology world, and building confidence specifically in that. And so really it's mastery and competence. So again, giving the skill or giving the knowledge and helping them build the skills, which only comes with practice. And so there has to be ways for us to safely engage with technology, trials, kind of us from whatever the age appropriate area is, right? Like what is appropriate for a 10-year-old is not appropriate for a 17-year-old necessarily. And so kind of looking at how can we actively engage as a family or as a parent-child in a parent-child way to start building some of those skills. Also, support and encouragement. We've talked a lot about being a trusted adult, being a safe place, and we will continue to. But really, from the get-go, and to Janny's point, like starting to have those conversations really early about what that looks like, and proving that you can respond as the safe adult in a way that is going to encourage more sharing. Self-awareness and identity. So we really want to look at like how does who am I and how does technology benefit who I am? How does it help me in my identity formation? How does it hurt me? That kind of like education, the emotion regulation and resilience. We'll talk about that when we talk about the 5 C's of media use. So I'm not going to get too much into that, but how is this affecting my ability to regulate? And then exposure and repetition. So what is too much? What's enough to build confidence? Just being really aware of all of that. And so I have over on the right side of the screen just some questions and kind of tips of like, hey, what do we need to be focused on? So what are the healthy ways to practice these skills? What are we providing? When are we providing positive feedback when technology is used appropriately? I think we're so focused on boundaries and apps to track things and correcting negative behavior and intervening when these negative things are happening. Like, when are we providing that positive reinforcement? When are we like, hey, I'm really proud of the way that you are engaging in X, Y, and Z right now, or the way that you told me about the cyberbullying that was happening here, the way that you stood up for X, Y, and Z. And so making sure that we're not only setting boundaries, disciplining, redirecting, but that we're also positively reinforcing the behavior that we want to see. And then focusing on self-awareness and identity formation outside of technology. Janny touched on that a little bit, and we'll touch on it again in a few slides. And then, do we know the signs of overuse, and how do we check in about these? Like, what is our agreed upon? If you're a teenager and I'm a parent of a teen, I'm not a parent of a teenager, but if I was, how do we agree on how we're going to have this conversation? It's awkward. It can be weird. Like, can we commit to checking in about this at a certain frequency, or what is something you're comfortable talking about, and kind of just making this something making this a journey that a parent and child are taking together, if that is kind of, as a provider, what you're encouraging, or as the provider, what are those things that they're comfortable, like what, how, how can we put this into something that is agreed upon both parties, that still gets me as this adult in the situation the information I need to make sure that I am guiding you the way that into a healthy way. And so now we're going to talk about strategies for creating connections with respect to technology and how to support that open communication and tech rules at home. And really, we're looking at navigating these skills, which are navigating social situations. So everything that Janny just talked about kind of rolls up into navigating a social situation online. Also learning right from wrong. A lot of what Janny just talked about kind of goes into learning right from wrong, learning safe from unsafe. I like a little bit better than just right from wrong. But also knowing what you're maybe being exposed to on uncensored applications that is not right, that is not okay. And how do we talk about that? And how do we navigate that? And how do we process that? Um, Important skills are how to explore the world. There are so many positive things that do come from technology. There are things that we have exposure to understand, to learn, to grow our knowledge in. And so how do I safely explore the world? How does that done in a positive way? How do I balance my leisure time, right? Like, how do I make sure that I have other activities that are not screen related, that I am, doing things for my sleep hygiene, doing things for my physical health, etc. And how do we build that balance in? And then also, how do I foster emotional fulfillment? I think that we've all been in that place where, like, we'll be like, oh my God, I'm so burnt out, or I am so stressed, or I'm so tired that I just want to like scroll. I don't want to talk to anybody. And then like an hour later, you don't feel any better. And you just kind of feel maybe more drained. Like, yeah, you didn't have to interact with anybody, but you don't necessarily feel rejuvenated or like you did something that fostered any sort of self-care. And so really talking about that emotional fulfillment and how do we manage that? And also like, what is appropriate emotional fulfillment to be getting from online content or from people online that maybe we don't know in any other circumstance. So these are the skills that we're focused on and the conversations that we're looking to have with you as we kind of build these skills, are really looking at like how social media makes them feel, like asking questions like, are there certain types of posts or people that make you feel left out? Oversharing. So maybe it's not something the youth that you're working with is doing, but we need to talk about it. So, hey, what do you think about people sharing this? I kind of feel like it's a little bit of an overshare, like helping them discern that boundary, discern that kind of place of like, ooh, maybe that is an overshare. Talking about the comments, like sharing popularity of it. So I know that like Instagram has a feature now where you can't see how many likes, it's just like you and others, as like a way to protect some of this. But really talking about like, what does it feel like? Like, are you posting because you want people to like it? Or are you posting because it's something you care about? And if no one engages in it, it doesn't matter. Like, you cared about it. And it was something that you put out there for yourself, not for others, and having conversations around that. Um, the self-awareness with digital use, like, it's crazy how fast time flies when you're on your phone. That is a conversation that I feel like so many parents and kids could have, or providers and kids could have, that just puts us on the same playing field, because it's that way for everybody. You don't have to be a youth to have time fly when you're online, if you're online in some capacity like that, if that's a way that you engage online. And so really leveling that playing field, showing that this is an experience that humans are going through, and framing it as like, hey, you're growing, you're maturing, and you're wanting more, I think every teenager wants adult responsibility or adult privileges. I think we've all heard, with privileges come responsibility. I think I heard that 1,000 times growing up, and it's true. And so how can I kind of get you to understand that I'm not trying to just like dump boundaries and restrictions and scary things on you, but I'm trying to like help you kind of engage at a level that I do as your parent, and this is what it comes down to, and these are the things we have to be aware at. Talking about drama and engagement on posts, and talking about reality versus fantasy, like what we always see online isn't real, whether that's something silly like the AI bunnies, if anyone knows what that is, who are jumping on the trampoline and everyone was like, oh, this is so cute, and then everyone's like, oh, that's AI. Like, a lot of people, including myself, were fooled by that. And so I think it's like understanding that, but also understanding like the perception that people are putting out about their life. Like, everyone loves the whole Instagram versus reality concept, but there's a lot more to that than, like, again, you're being fed what you want to see and the most idealized version of what you want to see. That is not entirely real. So how do we fill in the context and the blanks? So we have the 5 C's. This is from the American Academy of Pediatrics. I really encourage anyone to go to their website and download the conversation guides. They have them for providers, they have them for parents, they have them based in age groups. So it's really helpful. But really, when we're looking at the 5 C's, we're talking about the child. So how does media impact to the unique way the child sees the world? What kind of content are they wanting to engage in? Are we really drawn towards explicit or violent or kind of concerning content? Or is your child drawn to content that, fosters a hobby, maybe a creative hobby, or teaches them a new skill or something like that? And so really just like taking the individualized approach for the child and looking at how that media exposure is impacting how they're seeing the world and what their kind of worldview building is happening. Looking at the content. So what is the quality of the content? Again, are we aimlessly scrolling on social media for 2 hours, or are we learning to knit a blanket? Or are we looking at some of these other kind of more wholesome things? Are we FaceTiming with cousins we don't see very often? Are we talking with friends who are healthy friends that, maybe as a parent, I feel like I want in my child's life and I'm proud of them for maintaining? So really just looking at the content of that, of what they're engaging in and how it's affecting them. And then calmness. Is media their only coping strategy? I feel like this is something that we see a lot with like younger kids. I feel like I've had peers who have maybe let their younger children engage in screen time, and then all of a sudden they'll be like, we're not doing screen time during the week anymore. We're having too many behavioral issues around it, or like this is too chaos. And then they'll restrict screen time until like the weekends or something similar to that, and they'll see changes in behavior. I think when you're looking at older children and adolescents, we're more looking at like, when you're in a situation of coping, what are you doing? Are you, again, scrolling on social media, connecting with individuals online, or are you listening to music, maybe playing a sport or a game, or doing other things that would be potentially considered more positive? And I don't necessarily mean all of the online games that we're talking about when I say games. And then crowding out. So I think a good way for a family to kind of look at this is like, not the limit of screen time, but what is it taking away? So like, what do we as a family want back? Or what do you as an individual want back that you don't have because of the time that you spend on screens? And so kind of navigating the conversation in that way. And then again, making sure it's something we're regularly communicating about. So this is early and often. We want to build that digital literacy. We want to make sure that it's a comfortable topic so that caregivers can help kids navigate when uncomfortable things happen, because uncomfortable things happen. So those are the 5 C's. Again, that's from the American Academy of Pediatrics. There is extensive amount of information on their website about this and some really cool conversational tools. I am not going to go, so I will say these next few slides, one time check, but are also very content heavy because we wanted to be very intentional with the fact that you received the slide deck, but you do not receive our notes section. And so we wanted to put as much on the slide as we could so that you guys can kind of sift through this after the training and have this as kind of resources. But overall, for all of these monitoring screen time and building healthy habits, the biggest thing is that this has to be a family commitment. That again, children are going to do what is role modeled for them. To teach healthy digital habits, we have to role model it ourselves. We have to stay equally involved in our children's online lives, even when their digital world doesn't align with our own interests. So even if your kid has an interest that you want nothing to do with, you need to stay involved with them and with that interest in order to provide adequate monitoring and in order to like foster that connection around the conversation of it. The same principle applies to providers who are working with youth. We need to do trainings like this. We need to stay up to date on what's going on and kind of in the online world, what's trending in different age groups, and how can we build stronger connections and engagement and ultimately like continue to increase the awareness. So again, I'm not going to go through each one of these areas, but you will receive this slide deck. The next thing is really being informed and proactive. So as providers who work with kids and teens, we know that technology is a part of their daily lives. We know it's a part of our daily lives and our work. Whether you're a teacher, a counselor, a mentor, a therapist, you're playing key roles in supporting families and building healthy habits. And so there are steps that we can take to kind of make sure that we are keeping young people balanced. And at the end of the day, helping families create healthy digital habits is not about limits and rules. It is about being engaged and aware and connected around the usage. So that is really making sure that, again, it is stuff we understand, and it's something that we can engage in. Not equally, you're not going to be on every game your kid is playing, but they're going to talk to you about it, and you're going to know the features. Like, you're going to kind of try to learn. Like, I am not a video game person. You better believe when I have children, I'm going to learn because I just want to be able to have a conversation. One, if it's something you care about, I want to be able to talk to you about it. Like, I want to show that I have an investment in your interests, but I also want to be able to keep you safe. And I know we had a question earlier in the chat about this next slide. Again, these are all apps, so you can kind of see the costs. Some of them are free, some of them have paid subscriptions. You can kind of see ages and things, or the devices in which that they work for and what they do. These are all technology tracking applications of some kind. I'm not going to go into detail about each one of these. What I'm going to say is that what works with these is the way that you introduce them to your child. This is not something that I can't say for any situation, because I'm sure there are situations that different things are appropriate for out there, but we're not trying to secretly do this. This, again, is supposed to be something that the family engages in. And so we're wanting to be open about what the app is, where it came from, what it monitors, how their privacy will be respected even with that monitoring. So how, as a parent, do I plan to still respect your privacy even if I have access to these things? And we just want to create an open atmosphere of conversation around it. And I I think that like, I know that there was a lot of like, can these apps help mitigate some of these issues? These apps can absolutely help mitigate issues, but if they're not used in a way that is like agreed upon between the child and the parent or the adult, we're going to get into situations where we are using burner phones, or we are using technology that does not have this app because we do not trust our caregiver to continue to respect our privacy, and we don't have that safe space to discuss this in. So yes, they can help, but they're going to be most beneficial in situations where they're introduced in a healthy way and that they're agreed upon by both people, or that at least it's explained. Yeah, maybe your kid doesn't have to agree, but when we give the reason why behind things, that can really, really help. And then just prove to them that you're not trying to violate their privacy. You're just trying to ensure that they're safe. Encourage play without screens. So this is going to kind of walk you through, I know we're at a minute, so I'm trying to move quickly here, but this is going to kind of walk through, especially for younger kids, when we're trying to remove those screens so we can build healthy habits earlier of off-screen use, but how we can start to do that. And if we have maybe had a large exposure to screens and then now we're trying to restrict that, that is going to be a process that is going to take time. And something that's really important to note here is that we have to model the behavior. We have to put our phone down. We have to engage in non-screen activities. Or if we have to engage in a screen activity as an adult that is adult-centered, we need to explain that. I have to be on my screen right now for work. I'm ordering groceries. I'm doing things that relate to adult responsibility, not the same things that you're using a screen for. Being really open and transparent with our kids about that, saying, hey, I got to pay the bills, so I know that I'm on my phone right now, but normally we try not to be on our phones between these 2 hours. I just wanted to let you know so that you don't feel as though I'm not following kind of the agreed upon family contract around this. We have some managing screen time holds. A lot of this is recommended also through the American Academy of Pediatrics. So these are kind of like what would be the recommended max consequences for different years or different ages. How we, again, be clear about the why, how we're setting those boundaries. And I think the biggest thing is allowing earn back privileges, because that, again, is that positive reinforcement piece of this. And that positive reinforcement is what's really going to drive us seeing the behaviors that we want to see. And then lastly, it's weird that my screen did that, but lastly, we do have some activities here that we were able to find. So if you are trying to do these with clients that you're working with, or parents are struggling to start that conversation, here are some different activities that you can do with a child to kind of start that conversation, start navigating, feelings around technology. Maybe we've never talked about that before and that feels weird. Maybe if we put emojis in and do an emoji check-in, that can be a little more fun, or that can make it less awkward to quote unquote talk about, because we're not necessarily having to have a conversation, but we're still communicating. So that is kind of the majority of our slides for today. When you receive the slide deck, you'll see some polling questions that we didn't get to included in there, but I still encourage those to be conversations that you have with colleagues and other professionals. So I know a lot of people are having to hop off. I can stay on for about 9 minutes till about 1:40, and I know that Brittany can too. So I will stay online and see if there's any questions that come through that I can speak to just for just a few minutes. And then if you have any issues with the survey or the CEU certificate or any of that, just feel free to reach out and we will help you.
Yes, the survey link will be included in the event lobby when we're all done today. And the lobby is actually going to be open for about a month because that's where the recording lives. So you'll be able to come back and watch the recording there. And I did fix that for last week's recording as well. If you were here last week and want the recording, you'll get an email with the link to the survey. You'll get an email with a link to the slides and the recording. And all of that should be available with about an hour after we end our webinar today. I'm going to drop the link to the recording also right now in the chat. And there's lots of goodbyes, so I'm going to do it multiple times because it's going to get lost in the chat as we say goodbye. So if you want to click on it there, that will also take you to that survey. If you have any issues accessing the survey or the slides or the recording, I'm dropping an email address in here as well that you could contact.
Yeah. And I'll also say, I know that there's a lot of questions that also get lost in this chat because people go so quickly through it. If you guys have any questions ever that we didn't get to or that we just like weren't able to answer, you can always email them to us and Janny and I will figure out a good response and get back to you. Or if we don't know, we'll tell you that we don't know, and try to give you some resources to find the answer from people who are credible enough to give it to you because we don't ever want to say we know something that we don't. And so, yeah, that's always an option. I know that there's always a plethora of questions that we can't reach. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but I'll hang around for just a few minutes. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your day and a good rest of your week.
Yes. And Taylor, I see your question about the links in the chat. I usually don't include those, but you're welcome while the webinar is still open to go back through the chat and find them. I know Screen Sanity was one of them, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the 5Cs. A lot of that information is included in the slides that you could find, but probably not a direct link. So you might want to go back through the chat before you leave today.
And I just put my email in there for anyone who is asking how to contact me with questions. I just ask that you give me a little time to get back to you. We have quite a few things going on this week at Camber. And so it will take me a little bit to get to all of those. So I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Janny. Really appreciate you today. You have a wealth of knowledge that we are very grateful for.
Yes.
You're welcome. I kind of feel bad that I didn't tell everybody that 70% of kids hide online behavior from their parents because I should have said that earlier.
We can say that to those who are left on here still.
Yeah, to the people who are still here, the 200 of the people that are still here.
Yeah.
Lori said,
Yeah.
I know. It's hard. There's so much content that I'm like trying to spew out because I don't want to leave anything out.
Yeah.
I already knew they hit it. Me too.
Yeah. Every high school has a kid who sells burner phones.
Exactly.
Yes, and a Finsta. Do they still have Finstas? I remember.
Yeah.
That
Oh yeah.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Or I think one of our other polling questions was like navigating. How do you navigate if your child has a friend you've never met? Because that's kind of like they have a friend online that they've never met in person and like isn't someone in your family, and that's a conversation we didn't get to, but would be an interesting one to have.
Yeah.
Thank you to all the people who are complimenting the training. I feel so lucky to get to provide trainings that are relevant and that are like entertaining, because I know that sometimes doing things like this are not. So that's always a goal, is to stay really relevant on a topic that's needed and to be as engaging as possible.
Hi, Diane. Yes, Camber usually has 2 webinar series a year, one in the fall, one in the spring. I'm not sure what the spring webinar topics will be, but we do use the surveys that you all complete and the evaluations to choose the next topic. So if you want more information on screen time, put that in your evaluation so we know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you don't have a license, you can just put CASA, Carol, in that survey, and that's totally fine.
Awesome.
Cool social medias to be on for the teens. The teens that I know, they are on Instagram and Snapchat and TikTok.
Yeah. And TikTok.
Always forget about TikTok.
Snapchat is really big. Like, I feel like Snapchat is really big.
I feel like it went away for a while, and now it's like big again, but maybe I'm just
Yeah.
old and I wasn't into it.
Yeah. Jessica, we are working on parent education. I think that in the near future, it will roll out specifically for the parents of our residential kiddos. But depending on how that goes, we are looking at potentially making that like available to the public. So we will send updates on that in the next year or so as we get those things rolling out. Yep, Snapchat's where they chat most. I recently was like with a group of teenagers and the Snapchat. I was like, wow, guys, like I personally don't love Snapchat because I forget what we've been talking about. So I don't like the disappearing messages.
Yeah. The Finsta always gets me because I'm like, they always have that fake Instagram for the parents, and then they have their
Mhm.
personal Instagram for their friends.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I have to run to my next meeting at 2, so I'm going to go ahead and hop off here because I have to drive there. But if anyone has questions, again, my email is lost somewhere in that chat. If not, you can also use the contact Camber kind of button on the website, and that will actually go to one of my colleagues, but she'll make sure to get it to me. And I just really hope that this is something that we all continue to talk about. And I can say I do typically, Kyrie, have a lot of school districts reach out to me after the webinar series and ask me to come share with schools. I tend to request that I share this not necessarily just with like school social workers, but also with faculty and staff. And so that's definitely, if you know of schools that would want me to come share this information or someone from my team too, that is absolutely something we are willing to do. Okay, have a great day, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks. I'll hang out for a couple more minutes. Bye, everyone.
Bye. How do I leave without ending this?